And as promised, today we've got Mitch Heineman from Biking Brookline. Biking Brookline is why don't we let Mitch tell you all about it? Mitch, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. Why don't you start by telling us about yourself, and then we'll hear a little more about Biking Brookline.
Thanks, Tommy. I've been bicycling pretty much all my life. I grew up on the suburban edge of New York City, kind of the West Roxbury of New York City on the edge of Queens. And from the time I was a kid, biking was just how I got around. And bicycle advocacy came naturally to me that I was always interested in cycling, and it was always something I wanted to do. When I was in college, I volunteered in a bike shop similar to what Bikes Not Bombs does today around Boston, and I got involved in bicycle advocacy early. I've been to Brookline for 20 years, and when I came here, I'd already been doing bicycle advocacy in Milton, and I've been on the bicycle advisory committee in town on and off for the last 20 years, and I was involved in getting Biking Brookline started about 5 years ago now, which came up when we were looking at doing a repaving project on Babcock Street.
So, unlike the Bicycle Advisory Committee, which is a town government organization, Biking Brookline is not. Biking Brookline is an advocacy group. So tell us a little more about, who are your members and what are you trying to achieve, and maybe how you go about it. Tell us about the organization itself.
So Biking Brookline is a certified nonprofit, but we are an advocacy group that is promoting bicycling and bicycle use and bicycle infrastructure in the town of Brookline. We're exclusively focused on the town. That the town has a bicycle advisory committee, which is a political entity working for the transportation board. And Biking Brookline is an advocacy group similar to what you find in Metro Boston. There's the Boston Cyclists Union. For the state of Massachusetts, there's Mass Bike. And in Brookline, we have our own unique government, and we need our own unique advocacy group to push the town to be its best and build better bicycling infrastructure.
So what does your membership look like? Are these all like 45-year-olds in Lycra doing 100-mile rides every day? Like what does it mean to advocate for bicycling in Brookline? Who are the bicyclists of Brookline for whom you're advocating?
So Bicycling in Brookline, it's a free membership group. There's no fees for members at present or anticipated anytime in the near future. So it's just whoever wants to be a member is on our mailing list to get notified about issues of interest to what we call bicycle users in the lingo these days. That right, we're not people, not necessarily. There's probably a few people in Lycra and a few people riding fancy racing bikes, but mostly we like to think of a typical bicycle user as a typical person. They talk about in Denmark in bicycle advocacy that a bicycle should be like a vacuum cleaner. It's not something special that weird people use, that it's just a utilitarian thing that you use to go about life. And lots of people in Biking Brookline are just from all over the spectrum of young people, old people, people who are fitness freaks, people who just want to ride a bike to go get their groceries or get around town.
Well, so I'm disappointed to learn that board members clearly aren't paid very well if there's no dues and you're a nonprofit. So there goes that as a retirement option for me. When you say you advocate for bicyclists, right? This doesn't mean that you're advocating for just people to ride bikes. You're not running around saying, "Hey, you should ride a bike," right? What are the changes you would like to see in the world, or at least in Brookline? What are the things you're trying to achieve?
So bicyclists or bicycle riders, bicycle users are vulnerable road users in comparison to people in cars, motorists. Most of us, who ride bicycles, we also drive cars. We understand that there are times we want a car to get around. There are times we want a bicycle to get around. There are times where we want to be a pedestrian. And bicyclists are generally a little bit less vulnerable than pedestrians. But we're often put into the road that for instance, in a commercial district in town, it's illegal to ride on a sidewalk. And even in a residential area, if you're riding a bicycle, it's often going to be frowned upon to ride a bicycle. And so someone riding a bicycle is usually going to be in the road with cars. And if you're not an experienced cyclist that's been doing it all your life, like someone like me, it's pretty scary. I ride my bike everywhere. My wife rides her bike everywhere. That's how we get around. But for most people, they'd like to ride their bikes everywhere, but they're afraid to because they don't have the experience or the confidence, or they've had a bad experience. And we want to make bicycling safer for everyone so that it's an option for everyone who wants it to be an option. And at the same time, we don't want to be threatening to pedestrians, and we don't want to be antagonizing motorists. We want to be just sharing the space, the public space, with all other kinds of users of the public space.
And so, sorry, my mute button got stuck for a second there. We're on Zoom, right? Everyone knows it's not foolproof, at least not for a fool like me. So I hear you saying, bicyclists are vulnerable road users, and you're worried about that vulnerability, and you see that as a barrier to more people cycling. So what should we as a society do about that? And what is the Biking Brookline role in getting us to that future, that difference in the way that things work?
So there's really been a change in the thinking around the country over the last few years. The concept of complete streets has come into the lingo over the last decade, and the town 5 years ago formed a complete street study committee, which then formulated a complete streets policy that the town implemented. And complete streets says that the roads should be safe for all users, whether you're in a wheelchair, on a scooter, walking in a car, on a bicycle. And in order to do that, the general practice that's been developing around the country, and a lot of it has been adopted from Europe, where there's much more acceptance and implementation of bicycle facilities, is generally to make separated facilities where you can, that cyclists, people on bicycles, are not in cars, and they're not on foot. They're going at a rather different speed, that people walk at about 3 miles an hour, people bike at about 10 miles an hour, and cars on city streets are going to be going about 20 miles an hour. And cars are much larger and potentially quite dangerous to a bicycle. So wherever we can, we want to have, not wherever there's potential for conflict between those different kinds of users, we want to have separated facilities as much as we can. And what that is meaning in a lot of places, it's being implemented in Boston, in Cambridge, and Somerville, is putting in separated cycle tracks to have some kind of separation between motor travel lanes and bicycle lanes. And that could mean a line of parked cars. It could mean a couple of foot buffer with some posts, or it can mean a facility that's physically separated with separate curbs between the sidewalk, the cycle track, and the motor travel lanes.
Yeah, I'm having trouble with my mic. I'm sorry about that. So I can actually think of maybe some examples of each of those, right? If you're on Beacon Street going outbound from Coolidge Corner to Washington Square, there's not posts, but there are a few posts. And when it's not winter, there's sort of a wide bicycle lane between the parked cars on the right and the motorists on the left. St. Mary's Street going toward Coolidge Corner from Kenmore Square toward Coolidge Corner. Beacon Street between St. Mary's and Carlton has that separated lane where the parked cars are separating the moving cars from the bicyclists. And there are some parks actually in Brookline where there's a separate paved spot for walkers and joggers and for cyclists. And then the cars are over here somewhere. So that's another example, but there aren't too many. Are there plans, to your knowledge, to expand that one block on Beacon Street, for example, that treatment to other parts of town?
I unfortunately don't know the answer to that. I suspect the answer is in large part no, but I can't tell you for sure. I can tell you about a project that is currently at 25% design and is very exciting and will be built within the next 2 years, which is in Newton. Hammond Pond Parkway between Beacon Street and Route 9 will have a 12-foot shared mixed-use path for bicycles and pedestrians. So it'll be along that whole stretch from Beacon Street down to the Chestnut Hill Mall. And then there's a future project for some time after that, 2023 onward, to go from Route 9 down to Horace James Circle. So that project would largely be in Brookline, and that would be a 12-foot path for bicycles and pedestrians.
I was looking at that.
Pardon?
I was looking at that the other day, and that's DCR, right? That's not the city of Newton doing the work. That's the state, and it's currently a 4-lane road. And so instead of 2 lanes in each direction for vehicles, it'll be 1 lane in each direction for vehicles, and then some spot over here for everybody else. Very exciting, and we'll see. Are there some examples of where Biking Brookline has been a recent advocate for something in Brookline?
So there's a plan in the works for putting in bicycle lanes around the high school, and Biking Brookline was very active in advocating for getting that plan implemented. There's still some decisions to be made about how it's going to be put in with regards to Davis Avenue alongside the park coming away from the high school. There's a debate there about whether some of the abutters are not happy about the idea of potentially moving the parking to the other side of the street, among other things. But yeah, so Davis Avenue, or the whole high school project, and also along Gateway East, where we have been implementing, or there is an implementation of some good bike lanes there, and we're talking about reconfiguring some of the lanes on Washington Street as it approaches Route 9. May take place there to make the cycling a bit safer. So the town is moving along slowly but surely, but that's the interesting thing here when you consider what's happened over the last year with COVID. Brookline still moves slowly, whereas Boston and Somerville and Cambridge have made tremendous strides in the last year.
You mentioned Route 9 and Washington Street. Another issue in that part of town are dedicated bus lanes. And I recall Biking Brookline was one of the organizations in Brookline advocating for creating some dedicated bus lanes right in that section. I will, full disclosure, I think that's a great idea. And I also said the town ought to go for it. There's a lot of good reasons to do it. But given that there is separated bicycle infrastructure in that very stretch, because the town frankly demanded it 5 and 10 years ago when the Department of Transportation was considering the project, why would Biking Brookline be advocating for dedicated bus lanes? What's the connection?
Complete Streets is making the roads safe for everyone and giving everyone the ability to get to where they need to go. And public transportation is an important part of that. So, right, I mentioned walkers, wheelchair users, scooters, but public transportation is a big part of how we get around the city, whether it's on buses or on the Green Line trolley system. And we're all citizens. We all want to be able to get around safely, and of course, we're also interested, as many bicycle users are also very interested in the environment and sustainability. And the more people we can put on buses that don't need to drive, if there's good public transportation, the less congestion there is for motorists that need to use the road, and the safer it is for bicycles.
Makes sense to me. Now, I know that Biking Brookline, of course, if there's a specific proposal, we talked about Davis, Tappan, and Greeno, that Biking Brookline will get involved and say, hey, here's what we think as an organization, or even, let their members know there's an opportunity to participate. But that's not all the organization has done. I've seen some conversations about going on rides, and that's not the Pan Mass Challenge. That's something else. Tell us about Biking Brookline rides. What kind of rides? Who's coming? Do you have to have a a 10-speed bike to participate? And where are you going? What are these rides all about?
A little behind the times on the 10 speed, Tommy. I think nowadays bikes have 18, 27, 36 gears or whatever. But we've had a bunch of rides last fall, mostly or advertised to our membership to just go see some of the cycling infrastructure around Greater Boston and Cambridge and Somerville, and mostly just having fun and being social. But getting out to see some of the good infrastructure that Boston's put in place. So we've ridden out to South Boston and out to Charlestown, and especially we had some fun riding in Cambridge on, they put in some shared streets last fall. And we hope to spin the rides program up again this spring as once the snow clears, and just to get people riding around at a very leisurely pace. We're talking, as I said, like 10 miles an hour is a typical pace for when you're riding the bike. And when you put it all together and you stop at the light, you're not averaging much more than 8 miles an hour on a bicycle just riding around town. But that can be a very comfortable pace, and you get to see a lot more than you do on foot, and it can be a lot of fun.
I'm really having trouble with this mute button today. I don't know what the problem is, but it's socially distant fun, right? It's COVID safe, which is a it's going to be an issue for at least 2021. Hopefully, not much longer than that. So, if somebody wanted to get more involved in biking Brookline, they should just ride their bike to your house. How do folks? I know you got a Facebook page, right? How do folks learn more? How do folks plug in? How do folks get involved? Because they want to go on these rides, or want to join you in advocacy, or want to take over your board and demand high payments to board members, whatever their reason. How do they get involved?
So we have a Facebook page and a Twitter feed. Facebook, I think you can do fb.com/bikingbrookline. The Twitter handle, I think, is also just Biking Brookline. And from there, you can, and actually can probably email us as well. But I'm forgetting the email address right now. It's probably bikingbrookline@gmail.com. And you can just get added to the email list. So you can get mostly that's what we're doing, is putting out news blasts about issues that people might want to be contacting town officials about with regards to bicycle infrastructure. So mostly we're a mailing list. We've had those few small cycling events. They were all socially distanced, wearing masks, and we weren't talking about much more than a dozen people on any of the rides last fall. But those are our primary bits of contact right now. We have occasional board meetings, and the board meetings, of course, are open to anyone that's interested in participating.
Now we've got a few extra minutes, and so I've got some questions that, if Massachusetts had really good driver's ed and required people who are renewing their license to retake a test, they would all know this stuff. But in fact, we don't, and we don't. So, I've heard people ask some questions before, particularly around bike lanes. Right? What do I do with a bike lane if I'm in a car? If I'm in a car and I just got to run into the ATM, it's cool if I park in the bike lane, right?
I think the answer to that is no.
Okay, but how about if I'm going to parallel park? Can I get in the bike lane to parallel park?
Please no. The bike lane is for bicycling.
Fair, but I could go through the bike lane to park next to the curb where the meter is, though, right? That's certainly okay.
In places where the bike lane has been put, where the bike lane is adjacent to the curb and the parking lane is further out. I see. Yes, of course. If the parking is adjacent to the curb, of course you have to go through the bike lane.
Gotta
In
go
other
through,
places,
right?
the parking has been put out from the bike lane.
Similarly, if I'm making a right turn, say I'm driving outbound on Beacon Street and I got the bike lane, I got the parked cars next to that, and I'm going to turn right onto Amer, I'm going to turn right onto St. Paul. Maybe there's a traffic light, maybe there's not. What do I do about the bike lane? How do I navigate that safely?
Be considerate and look out. are the most important things. Uh, right, treat the bicycle lane as another lane of traffic. Right, you're in a car, you can't drive in the bike lane, so you can't turn right from the bike lane. Oftentimes, if it's a major intersection, the bike lane will merge into the motor travel lane before the intersection. But in general, just slow down, be courteous, look out.
So we're looking out for a right hook. Maybe you could help people. So what's a right hook? When we say right hook, what are we talking about?
A right hook is cyclists lingo for getting hit by a car that turns right in front of you. I've had 2 bicycle accidents in my life, and both of them were right hooks.
And in almost all cases, to be clear, the right hook is the motorist at fault, because the bicycle who's in the lane going straight, by definition, has the right of way. A vehicle turning across a lane of traffic is in the wrong. And so, message number one, if you got everything you need to know about biking Brookline and you want to know how to be a safer driver, is if you're turning right, you need to be careful of not just what's in front of you and what's to the right, but you actually have to know about what's behind you, right? Because if a bicyclist is to the right of you and behind you and going straight, they actually have the right of way, and you're not allowed to just pull into them. And if you do, even if they hit the side of your car, that's on you, the motorist. That's your responsibility to not put them in that situation. The other big issue we hear a lot about is what do we call it? Like, it's like the yeah. What is the there's a technique for opening your door to help reduce the chance of dooring someone.
The Dutch reach, I think, or something
The
like that.
Dutch reach. Tell us about that.
I have not personally practiced the Dutch reach, but I've heard about it. But the idea is that rather than just opening your car door with your left hand as you're getting out from the driver's side, and maybe you just inadvertently open the door without looking, if you reach across with the other hand, it forces your head to look back a little bit and see if there's a cyclist approaching in a bicycle lane that would be adjacent to the driver's side of the automobile.
And so this sort of raises this should be obvious but worth reminding folks phenomenon that when there's a 5-foot bicycle lane with moving cars on one side and parked cars on the other side, that 5-foot lane is not encased in super clear steel, that automobiles are kind of coming in and out in different directions. So if you're on a bicycle and you are in a bike lane on Beacon Street, for example, what do you recommend for bicyclists to help them avoid getting doored, to help them avoid the moving cars, avoid the right hooks? Where should they be in the lane? How should they be piloting their bicycle to minimize risk?
Right. So a car door, right, a fully open car door, is probably 3 feet out of that 5 feet in the bicycle lane, and the bicycle is 3 feet wide. And so, right, even riding in the middle of the lane, if someone swings the door all the way open, you'd be in trouble. So in general, to be totally safe, you want to, as a bicyclist, you need to be vigilant and looking in as you ride down the street, looking in the car mirrors and seeing if there's a driver in the car, even before you can see into the car. But in general, if you're going to ride at some speed, you're probably going to want to ride towards the left edge of the bicycle lane, closer to the moving cars. If you're moving slower, you can be closer to the parked cars, but you need to be especially vigilant. And slower is safer always.
But it takes longer. Mitch, thank you so much for the tips for both motorists and for cyclists, and really for telling us about Biking Brookline. You mentioned fb.com/Biking Brookline, and it's a group for everybody, and it doesn't even charge dues. So, if you're on a bike because you're just stringing together your rent and doing the best you can, God bless you. Keep working at it. This organization is an organization that would welcome you with open arms. Listen, we've had a great time. Mitch Heineman, thanks for joining us on the show. You've been watching Brookline Interactive Group. I'm Tommy Vitolo. We'll see you next Thursday, same bat time, same bat channel. Thanks, everyone.